David Fowley, thank you for joining me on this time capsule review of a film called A Little Prayer. Why is it a time capsule review? It's because we have seen it, but it is not officially out yet. It just picked up distribution through Music Box Films. It was just as of the time of this recording a couple nights ago that we saw it as the closing entry in the Chicago Critics Film Festival 2025 edition. And the writer-director, Angus MacLachlan, I'm sorry, I'm going to get that wrong. I'm going to redo that bit. And the writer-director, Angus MacLachlan, and the star, Jane Levy, actually showed up. David Strathairn, the co-star of the film, was supposed to be there, but he had a filming obligation and couldn't make it, unfortunately. But it was a delightful evening, a really interesting Q&A, and a fascinating film that we're going to talk about. So by the time everybody's watching this, the movie will be out. We're waiting until the until the release plan has been announced and it's actually in theaters to release this episode. And we do have the spoiler banner on below because there is a lot to get into. But first of all, David, preamble aside, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy week of film festival films.
And you saw a lot of them. So I
Yeah.
So I guess what were your kind of like high level thoughts on A Little Prayer? We'll talk about what the movie is, but I just kind of want to set the table with what your feelings were.
Well, high level thoughts, I suppose, would be that this is. I'm glad that it's been picked up. I think it's going to be in a good place with Music Box Films. Music Box Films. Um, yeah, I really liked it. I think it's the kind of movie that asks you to kind of recalibrate how you're watching it, and just kind of you know catch up with the pacing and timing of it. Just because it is in in essence a simple story about a complicated family, in North Carolina, and so there's a certain cadence to it all that you have to align yourself with, and once you're there, it's kind of a sweet spot, I think.
Yeah, this is the same guy who brought us Junebug 20 years ago, a movie that I have still, and it's been 2 decades, I've never caught up with that movie, even though it's the film that gave us Amy Adams, and it was sort of Ben McKenzie's, like, I'm going to go indie and be a real actor coming off the OC, or actually in the middle of the
Mhm.
OC.
Wow.
So how is Junebug? How does this kind of compare to it? Because it sounds like there's sort of similar, at least premises, but I could be totally wrong.
Well, I would say, uh, the director and writer Angus MacLachlan he's from North Carolina, and then Junebug was also set there, as is A Little Prayer. Um, I would say that both films they could be kind of once removed cousins or something like that, as you say in the South, I guess. But well, I mean, you could say that anywhere. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely similarities. It's been a while since I've seen Junebug, so you know. Um, but I think he's going back to telling a story about um, a family, and maybe on the outside, it's like one of those families that you notice and you see, and you think, oh, they got it together. But you know, like every family, maybe not so much once you actually like step in their house and see how they are with each other.
Yeah, and that's the movie is like the high level pitch essentially is there's the father of this family, Bill, played by David Strathairn, his son David, played by Will Pullen, works for him at this company. I can't even remember what they do. They're manufacturers of some note.
Yeah, a little bit.
Um, but it's a family business that goes back, generations. I think when the executive assistant is like making a pseudo sales call, she's like, "Yeah, this business has been around for over 60 years," which is it's kind of a fascinating story. Family run business in a small town as you said, it looks on the outside, it's like it's a nice kind of place to work. They go out to, happy hours, and they're big supporters of the VFW because Bill is I believe it's a Vietnam vet.
Yeah.
But once you, as you mentioned, step inside the house, you realize that there's kind of trouble in paradise. David and his wife, Tammy, played by Jane Levy, they live they live in the little kind of house behind the house. It's not a garage, but it's like a cottage guest house. Yeah. They've been having some kind of marital struggles. And it turns out that David has been cheating on his wife with the executive assistant, Narcedalia, at the company. And this kind of secret comes out in drips and drabs. There's a lot of the information in this movie about the family does. So it's sort of a slow burn of multiple reveals that kind of culminate in even more surprises towards the end of the movie. So that's one of the things I loved about this sort of onion peeling back, is you're never quite sure where the movie's going to go. And the performances, I think, are the real anchor to this. Now, there's some other kind of subplots and diversions that happen in the movie, but that's the kind of the high level pitch. There's this infidelity that's going on inside this house. The dad knows, the daughter-in-law is sort of in denial if she even knows what's going on, and it turns out later, of course, spoilers down below, that she gets pregnant, and deals with that situation in a way that we'll talk about in a little bit. But the unique thing about this movie is that it's a bond between a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law, where they're not aligned against the son, but they both acknowledge that that David has a lot of troubles. He was also a vet. We're, I guess, meant to think back to the Iraq or Afghanistan wars. He did a couple of tours there and kind of came back with some problems that he's never fully dealt with, if at all, because he's sort of the good upstanding son. There's another, his sister Patty is also a grown adult who has a daughter who comes back to live with them temporarily to escape an abusive kind of drug-fueled relationship, and she's a hurricane of drama. So both the kids are dysfunctional in this family, where the kind of the key word is denial. Sort of this military, need to know basis of information. They don't talk about all this stuff unless something is really, breaking down the house, and that leads to all sorts of problems. So, yeah, it's a very, I think, deliberately paced drama. There's scenes that are punctuated with these kind of like long dramatic dialogue exchanges, but it is more of a contemplative movie than I think I was prepared for. I did enjoy it, but it's a weird movie to recommend. It's very kind of art house, not very mainstream. I think the perfect home for it is Music Box Films, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant about kind of calibrating like how we watch films, is that it's a little bit unexpected in the way what the story is focused on and how it's told, which there's no problem with that. It's just it takes maybe a little getting used to, a little alignment on our end. But once we're there, I think it's the way the director has written the story and is shooting the story. I think it's I think what was really what I kind of latched onto was how there's a lot between the writing and the performances. There seems to be a lot going on that's unsaid. As you mentioned, it's not like a family that they really open up and talk about things. But as the patriarch of the family, Bill, you get the idea that at some point in his life, I mean, he's probably in his 70s, and at some point in his life, he had changed. And he was probably always like a trustworthy, kind-hearted, gentle guy. But I think and I don't know exactly where it was in the movie, but the more time I spent with him, the more I realized that, like, oh, he himself probably changed at some point. The way he approaches people, the way he sees things and sees life. He's a lot more contemplative than probably most guys his age, most veterans, at least that we meet in the movie, and probably anybody else in the in the family. And by contemplative, I kind of mean he's also quite observant about what's happening around him, and instead of just looking straight ahead and moving forward, like so much of his family, kind of barreling through and not saying much about what's going on in their lives, he is noticing things. And I feel like that was probably, there was probably at some point, maybe decades ago, um, I feel like at some point, something changed in him. And uh, just because the only reason I say that is just because I feel like this probably was when these his adult children were growing up. This probably was like the essence of a military family, where like you move around a lot, or you don't say, or either you move around a lot, or you just don't say much about really, how you're feeling, or you dealing with your feelings, or your struggles, or anything like that. And I think he has become very much in tune with, you know the feelings and the struggles of those around him, so much that it almost consumes him, especially his family. And I think it's I think it's part of it is somewhat universal, meaning I think any parent who now has adult children could kind of relate to, like, you know gosh, you do your best, and hopefully you do your best, and you don't know what kind of person they're going to turn out to be. And I think that's, kind of one of the things that he's wrestling with, is that, like, he has a certain set of, morals and convictions, and his two children maybe don't, and not, at least not the same. And it's concerning for him. And he, I feel like at times he may feel somewhat responsible, but you know, after all, when it comes down to it, I mean, they're adults, and as a parent, there comes a time where you have to say, like, I am going to be there for these kids who are now adults, but I I'm not responsible for their actions and who they are, and you know what they do and what they become. Uh, it's a hard thing.
And you do feel that tension between, the you mentioned that he notices things, but I feel like he gets kind of pulled into noticing things because when we meet him, when we first like really see him out in the wild, he's at the office. He's kind of in his office, doing paperwork, and he notices that his son is being a little bit too friendly
Hmm.
with the secretary. And maybe it's the thing that puts it on his radar is like maybe this is the fifth time that he's noticed that he's
Right.
getting a little bit too friendly, or maybe they're touching hands when they shouldn't be, or something like that. And that kind of draws him out to say, okay, this is a problem that I need to address or try and fix, or this isn't right, because if there is something going on, that drama is going to naturally seep into my home life because my son and his wife are living under my roof, and if there's an affair going on, yada yada yada. But the thing I like about it, Bill, is that he doesn't have all the answers. He feels like he needs to act even though he's not quite sure what he's supposed to
Yes.
do. At
Hmm.
the end of the film, he goes to visit Narcedalia, the secretary, and he shows up at her house and encounters the roommate, or the friend who has moved in temporarily due to flooding the apartment. And when there's that kind of confrontation, it's very interesting because it turns out that Narcedalia is also pregnant by by David, the son. So that's 2 pregnancies in the movie with very different outcomes. And Bill says, he's very kind of old fashioned and traditional in his way, saying like, well, if the baby is, David's and you're going to keep it, we feel there's some kind of a familial obligation to help. And Narcedalia is like, no, I don't want anything from you or your family. Your son is a monster who abuses and beats me. And I don't know if any of that is true. And I want to get your thoughts on that, because something else that she says in the conversation is that the baby is not David's. I don't know if I believe that,
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel like it felt like she really had a thing for David, and then when the relationship kind of crumbled or fell apart, she actually left Bill's company to go work somewhere else because of because of those issues. It didn't seem like she was out there parading around sleeping with a bunch of dudes and all of a sudden she got pregnant. So I don't know if she was lying about the pregnant, or lying about the parentage. I don't know if she was lying about the abuse as just a way of like kind of compartmentalizing and making sure that this is the final way to push out Bill and David and the rest of the family. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. Please don't make an issue of this or I'll go to the cops, something like that. It felt very protective and like she's going to do this on her own. And she just wants nothing to do with the people that not got her in that situation, because she's an adult, as we mentioned, but she just wants to cut ties with that part of her life and move on and raise the kid in a way that she sees fit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that is one of the great scenes of the movie. Yeah, I think like it's interesting, like her reaction when her roommate tells her that Bill's here. She's like, oh, okay. And it's not like she doesn't like Bill. It's just that I feel like she just, like you said, she just wants to be done with anything that's related to David, anything or anybody related to David. Like, I need to move on. And is he a monster? Well, I guess kind of the great thing is we don't necessarily see him being a monster. He's irritable and he's kind of, he brushes things off, and you could see that he could probably be quick tempered, but this is coming from her side. And I tend to, I would, the way she says it is quite believable. And he could have, it could have been an incident that only happened once, and maybe for maybe for her that was enough, and understandably
And
so.
honestly, for anybody, it's enough, because they say,
Yeah.
that whole thing, like, it'll never happen again. That's that's your tell
Yeah.
to run. But what the reason I have doubts is because you're right. It's a very well done scene. I was like, wow, that a lot of this makes sense. He's came back from the war. He's
Mhm.
got everything bottled up, and he never really sought help. And the only time we really see him break down or break his facade is in a scene where he's leaving work, and Bill comes out to kind of confront him in the car, and David like breaks down, starts crying, but almost immediately recovers and says, I'll see you at the VFW or whatever, and he drives away. What puts into doubt the abuse angle is the final scene of the film, which is Bill and Tammy having this lovely exchange on the park bench, where he basically says, you've got to leave my son for your own good. And she says, yeah, I've been planning to, I just haven't haven't figured out how to do it. And Bill says to her, like, has David ever hit you or abused you? And Tammy's reaction is one of, the way I read it, and maybe I do need to see this movie again, because it does have some rewatch value,
Oh
especially
yeah.
the information you find out throughout the film at the end. It's very kind of usual suspects. You watch it again and you'll be able to watch for clues as to, oh, this is
Mhm.
what the actor was planting. This is what the writer and the director were planting seeds to give you kind of tells as to what's going on. But Tammy's reaction to that question about abuse was genuine shock. Like, what? No, he's got problems, but he's never hit me. So I'm no expert in these matters, but it seems to me that if he was going to be that kind of an abusive person, there would be some kind of a manifestation of that at home, unless she was lying to protect Bill's feelings about his son. I don't know. There's so much going on here. And like you said, so much that's unspoken that at the end, you're like, all these people need to get into group counseling and open up,
Yeah.
because I have no idea what's true.
I mean, I believe the response of both women. I think, and it could be because Tammy's so close with Bill that, maybe she wants to just, she doesn't want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it kind of tracks that somebody could, you could, obviously he could still be volatile and difficult and a problem without being physical. And there also could be close calls as far as being physical.
Mm.
But I think it makes me want to, believe. How do you say the other character's name?
Oh, Narcedalia.
Narcedalia. Yeah. I'm sure she shortened that for like Delia or something. Yeah,
I think that people referred to as Nars.
Nars. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Nars.
Mhm.
So I think with his whatever relationship he had with Narcedalia, um, it could have been brief. It could have been, obviously it was secretive, and so I think it's one of the things I like about this movie. It makes you kind of really like explore internally as a viewer what these characters could be like, because we're only given so much. But so I think that David having this kind of secretive relationship, however long it was, with Narcedalia, had kind of like that space to kind of not hold back, and just, lash out or whatever. Maybe he was, at times more volatile with Narcedalia than he would be with Tammy, because she's in a family, she's, close to Bill, his father. So it it tracks. It could, it could possibly be that way. Um, and I like the fact that when Tammy quickly responds like, no, he hasn't ever done that. Um, it could be very true, but it could also be true that she wants to kind of protect him from one more thing, protect Bill.
Yeah. Right. I don't know. There's just something. There is a lot going on there, um, because additionally, and again, I'm psychoanalyzing a fictional character that we only get to know in the last 5 minutes of the film, really. But there doesn't seem to be any fear of leaving Bill. Like, the reason I haven't left is because he abuses me, and I'm afraid he's gonna, kill me or something. Not Bill, David. Sorry. It's weird because we've got David Strathairn playing Bill, and his son's character's name is David. So apologies, I'm getting this screwed up. But no, but Tammy doesn't seem to have any fear of leaving David, aside from the kind of, it's going to devastate him, obviously, but there doesn't appear to be any worry about, like, well, when I make this announcement, I'm going to have the cops, outside to help out.
Well, I think the hard part for Tammy too is that she's come from a place where she's had to struggle a lot,
Hmm.
until she got into this family. And not that the family is well off, but they're stable, more stable than what she's used to growing up. And I think when she says that it's something that I've been trying to do, or working towards, meaning leaving David and essentially the family, the hard part is that, despite her relationship to David, it's it's pretty much a stable and comfortable family situation for her comparatively. And she is very like, she has a great way with people.
Hmm.
She's, you could say, mild mannered, but also just very calm and caring. Um, you know, Pretty much like Bill. Um, and so I think like the hard part for her is leaving that. And she even says that at the end in the great scene in the on the park bench is the hardest part would be leaving Bill, is because that she's had such a great relationship with him, and it's something she never had before with, like a parental figure. um and it yeah, it's such a touching, you know scene, and both actors just knock it out of the park in that scene. The Levy and Strathairn are basically the heart of the movie.
Yes, and it's weird because the movie kind of throws off that balance of the two of them,
Hmm.
because starting out, we think this is going to be kind of Tammy's story and then how she relates to Bill, but there's that whole like Narcedalia chapter that sort of fills in right before that that park
Right.
bench scene. It feels like there's 15 minutes where we don't see or hear about Tammy really much at all. And like, oh, that's right, this movie is about sort of about her. And that's not a criticism. It's just something that I noticed when, like, right before the park bench scene, as we're calling it, Tammy and Bill are at. It's not. I don't think it's a museum. It's like a local arts center, or
Yeah.
where they're looking at this, beautiful oil painting and talking about um, panoramic views and descriptions of the art. And MacLachlan really does a great job of kind of zooming in and panning across this picture and then coming back out to the point where I feel like on the big screen I could see the almost the pencil line of
Yeah.
the circle of where the sun was, but when you pull all the way back, you don't see it because it's this bright blazing sun.
Hmm.
It's we've been talking about the drama of this movie, but there's the beauty of it, the sheer craftsmanship of it is something really worth seeing on a big screen, not just like renting it.
Yeah.
But I will say that as far as the that relationship goes, Tammy, one of the reasons she may have a big problem leaving Bill, or sorry, David, again. Um, I'm talking to David about a character named David who's not played by an actor. The other actor's name's David.
So meta.
It's Davidception. Um, but I gotta say, she works. I think she works at Target, and
Yeah.
and
At
so
one
it's like
point, you see her with the Target shirt on. Yeah.
right. So David, her husband, and then Bill, they are both like higher up in this like small family run company, but they're like kind of supporting the household, it seems, but it's not easy to leave someone and strike on your own on a Target, clerk's
Right.
salary. So that could be another factor. Um, yeah, there's just so much to unpack here. The one thing I mentioned, there are two two babies in this movie. Tammy finds out that she's pregnant, and she decides to have an abortion
Hmm.
in one of the more harrowing and impressively acted scenes of the film. We cut to her in an office. It's just a close up of Levy's head, and the camera kind of pans around her as she's like listening to information from the clinician about the pill that I think she took. It sounds like she took a pill, and then there's going to be kind of after effects, and she's got to come back in 3 weeks and all this other stuff. And just like to see Levy like subtly crying and getting worked up over this, and then finally we see the person she's talking to, and kind of like reassurances of like, you're going to be okay. You made, it's a very you're strong. It's you made a very difficult decision, but you're going to be okay. This is, it's a great scene, and it was a scene that I was very impressed by because it was not kind of the cavalier attitude towards abortion that we sometimes see in these movies.
Hmm.
And you can see Tammy really wrestling with the decision that she just made. you know
Yeah.
But like the movie Thunderbolts, which I don't know, again, I don't know how long after this recording. Thunderbolts came out like last week.
Mhm.
So this might be several months in the future. But there was a decision that was made after that movie came out and did kind of middling to rebrand it as the New Avengers. And it was this kind of post release campaign and bit of information that sort of colored the way that I perceived the movie
Right.
retroactively. And it's not kind of not fair. The Q&A for this movie did that to me with this scene in particular and kind of the movie overall.
Mm.
Because when Levy came out and I think she was asked about this scene, it really bothered me. And I've kind of wrestled with the abortion question my entire life, and now I am like 95% pro-life and 5% pro-choice. In that I don't want
Mm.
to take that choice away from anyone, but I feel like the old Hillary Clinton motto of safe, legal, and rare is the way to go, but the emphasis should
Sure.
really be on the rare. The attitude that Levy had on stage, which is like she
Mhm.
said, it's not a left or right issue, it's abortion is a human right. I'm like, well, but there is also a human who isn't being kind of taken into account as far as like what their rights are.
Mhm.
But that's one thing. That was the splinter. But the thing that really stuck deep is she's like, in that moment, because she said that they had filmed that scene the morning of the reversal of Roe versus Wade. Because this movie was filmed several years ago, and it's just now coming out because of distribution issues and all that stuff. But she said in that moment, you know, Tammy wasn't thinking about her baby. She was thinking about the relationship she was in, and leaving David and all this other stuff. I'm like, that is the exact kind of like cavalier attitude that kind of grossed me out. I'm like, she wasn't thinking about the child in terms of it being a life that she was, giving up. Because when I'm watching it, I'm thinking, the first time I saw the film, I was saying, this is a tragedy because she doesn't want to bring a baby into this unstable relationship. Perhaps that does, shade some of the abuse allegations and that thing. But to hear the actress talk about what she was putting into that role, and perhaps it's unfair because it's not in the context of the content of the film, but it's in the context in which it was made.
Right.
It kind of sickened me.
Um. Yeah, I didn't have a stronger reaction that to that as you did. I think it's it's kind of understandable that like that a lot is revealed, and that's why, like you said, a rewatch is kind of something that we'd probably get a lot more out of the movie. Um, there's it's understandable for her to like later on we see that we hear that line, I've been working on it. And I think um deciding to go through with the abortion is one of the ways she's working on it. Because obviously, yes, she's thinking that she knows how Bill is, and she knows how David is, obviously, and she knows that like having this baby would be just not a good idea, and not a good. I mean, obviously, you could go the route of having the baby, uh, carrying it out to term, giving it up for abortion, but there's the whole
Adoption.
yeah,
giving,
giving it up.
giving it
It's
up for abortion.
the two A words, right? Giving it up for adoption. But then there's the whole thing of like you know, being pregnant around town. Oh, we're so happy for you. But internally, she's not happy because she doesn't want to continue to have connections with David. And she doesn't know there's nothing, no kind of indication that he's given her of what kind of a stand-up great father he would be. So there's it's a complicated thing as it typically always is. Um, so I don't think it's so much a cavalier attitude about it, but it's kind of there's a lot of loaded feelings here. And she knows that it's not just I'm not in a place to have a baby. It's just that And I think she would probably, if the situation were better, she would probably want to have a baby. But it's just, you know, it's not. It wouldn't be a good situation really for anybody. And I think it'd make her relationship with Bill harder. It would make everything, more challenging just because of the state of her relationship with David. And it would be, more of a reminder that she's connected to this family. Even if she had the baby and still left, you know, um, it reminds me of, you know, how Nars wanted to just cut off from the family. It would be difficult to do that considering how mindful and caring Bill is as the grandfather. No, we have to. I see a family obligation to help you out here. But if that would mean having a connection with his son David, she wouldn't. Neither of them would want that. And so, I think it's a hard to complicated thing.
It is. The other option is, I guarantee you, if she had kept the baby and Bill found out about it, that he would be willing to because we saw it with Narcedalia. He would be
Yeah.
willing to step in and help and support. And on top of that, he loves Tammy. She
Uh-huh.
is a member of the family, so it's not like I feel like he would sooner kick Bill out of the house or kick David out of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And help raise his
Yeah.
grandchild
Yeah.
than kick Tammy out or put up with any kind of nonsense regarding David's feelings about the pregnancy, whatever. There is a family connection there, and perhaps he would see it as an opportunity to become the true father figure that he wasn't able to when his own kids were growing up.
Right.
Because earlier on in the film, there's a great line when he's talking to his wife, Vanita, played by
Mhm.
Celia Weston, who we haven't even mentioned in this conversation. But he said, "V, was I a bad father?" And she said, "You did what you had to. You had a company to run, I guess." That "I guess" was very telling,
Yeah.
and it's just this whole idea. You referred to Bill as the patriarch, and what I loved about A Little Prayer is it does discuss the importance of the father figure in, a family, especially this one,
Mhm.
but it doesn't come with that air of like foot down, a
No.
kind of authoritarianism. He's kind of run over by his, reckless daughter that's, won't listen to him, and he still like gives her checks to
He's
to
he's a, he's a total opposite of Robert Duvall and the Great Santini. So
there you go.
yeah.
But he's still and he towards the end of the film, he's asked, I think Narcedalia asks him, did you do everything you ever want to do with your life? And he's like, I don't think I've ever done anything to positively impact anyone or anything.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who doesn't feel much about himself. He feels a lot of regret, even though he started a company, he employs people, he's supporting his family to the extent even that he shouldn't, but he still doesn't consider himself to be kind of a successful human being. So that's why that whole issue of, I said cavalier because for all the reasons that you mentioned with the relationship and all this other stuff, when I watched that scene, I
Mhm.
could see those concerns and also imagine the concerns about the actual life that had been ended. But in that Q&A, and it was especially weird because she was talking about, and this is getting a little personal, but she was talking about how the whole abortion thing and, whatever, it's a woman's right to choose and all this other stuff. And then she's talking about, yeah, I got to get home to my newborn. I'm like, I don't know, there was just a very strange, almost like a rules for thee, not for me kind of disconnect there. Like, would she have
Yeah.
felt that same way about like if it was a scene with her own child?
I,
But that's all of those considerations that you brought up with the relationship and the turmoils and the problems that would cause. Those are like seven things on a list, and then number eight is, oh yeah, by the way, this was going to be my daughter or son.
right. I As far as Q&As go, I kind of take them at face value and kind of with a grain of salt, just because, some actors and directors, filmmakers for that matter, are totally fine in a Q&A setting, and almost a packed house there at the Music Box Theater, and you know they're people, they're humans, so you don't know like what is going through their minds leading up to getting on stage and talking about the movie, what's going on in their lives. There was a time, more than a couple of times, where Levy was just like, what was the question? I don't know if I answered that right. And I'm like, that's relatable. Because it's so easy to get off in a tangent, as I often do in this show. And just kind of, oh gosh, these lights are really bright. Oh, how many people are out there? Or, just like, and I don't know. It's easy to just not, maybe come up with, the right, not necessarily the right response, but like, it's easy to get lost up there on stage in a Q&A. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what she did. I felt like in a way, maybe that Angus, who was also there, I felt like he was a little bit more at ease and maybe used to these kinds of things. So, I don't know. I mean, she's also, I can understand what she's saying, because she's also a young mother, like, or rather a new mother,
A new
so
mother. I would
yeah,
a new mother, I think, is more fair.
new mother. Yeah. So, I didn't read too much into it. But it is very kind of interesting, and it makes the movie that scene a little bit more potent, when she did say that, like, the outcome of Roe v. Wade was announced the day they were filming that scene. So it's like, oh boy, it's kind of a loaded thing for an actor to deal with too.
I mean, it can be, but again, that gets down to kind of your political opinions, right? So it's like
Yeah.
there are people who, when that decision came out, they weren't like filled with, dread. They were filled with, excitement or ambivalence or something. It's just,
Mhm.
again, kind of going back to the Thunderbolts thing, like you can't unsee or unknow something once you've seen it or known it. So I feel like I would have been better off not going to that Q&A and just living in my own ignorance of like, oh, there's a lot going on in this scene, but it turns out there was different things going on in that scene, or at least in
Sure.
the intent.
I guess now that I know that, it makes me want to rewatch it even more, because it makes me wonder, like, okay, well, with the actor knowing that, and that being somewhat fresh, that real life news, let's relook at how the character is processing this moment, uh, with or without those lines. It's like, you can, or with or without that knowledge, you can maybe, now that you know what was going on with the actor in real life, is there much of a difference in that scene, or
Hmm.
is there, so sometimes, yeah, I agree that, kind of less is more of, knowing kind of internally what the actor is going through. I don't necessarily always need to know that, just because I'd rather be involved in the character than the actor, if that makes sense. Um, but I think in this case, it's an interesting, like, you know, behind the scenes tidbit, I guess,
Yeah.
and just, okay, let's watch this again now that I know this. I don't think it'll take away at all from the kind of the potency of that moment, but um, I could see what you're saying about, you can't unknow something. Thankfully, in this case, it's not so much about unseeing something; it's more about unknowing.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so yeah, but yeah.
Well, and this is going to be like the rare, I think, recommendation where I'm going to say definitely at least go see this in the theater once when it comes out, and
Mhm.
then if I can't say, turn around and go see it again because it's not exactly an action-packed, thrill ride. It is a movie you kind of have to watch, sit with, and then think about afterwards, and then watch it again at some point. But yes, this is definitely get my watch it twice recommendation. Um,
Yeah, and that makes sense because it's like watch it in the theater and then make a plan to revisit it because I don't think watching it twice, like rewatching it rather immediately, is necessary, but make a plan to rewatch it again. Um, and I think you'll pick up on things, especially kind of like you mentioned, like kind of like this slow, gradual, usual suspects type style of revelation. Knowing what you know by the end of the movie, it is interesting to see how the actors kind of calibrate what they reveal, about
yeah.
the characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is kind of a strange place to be in because this has been a spoilerific conversation. So I'm saying if you watch the movie once, we're imploring you to watch it again. If you haven't watched it at all, what are you doing here? But no, before we go,
Watch the movie for the first time, then listen to this, and then go back and yeah,
there you go. Unknow everything you know about this spoilerific show and
yes,
do that. But no, I do want to just say this has two more things to conclude on. They're kind of related. The closing song is called Un flambeau Jeanette Isabella by Diane Taraz. I stayed through the credits because I had to know what this song was because it's a beautiful song. Bill and Tammy go out and they look kind of at this open like park. It's almost like a park in a forest preserve or something,
hmm,
and the camera like pans away from them to just get the entire panoramic view as they mention of the park, and then this beautiful French song comes up. It's one of the most powerful closing moments I've ever seen in a film. I was genuinely stirred by this.
yeah.
And then staying through the entire credits, I saw in the special thanks, Kogonada got a shout out, and
Oh, I didn't notice
he
that.
yeah he made a film that we had talked about a few years ago, Columbus,
Yeah,
which I feel like is another great companion piece to this movie. A very minimalist kind of character drama involving, these kind of like big life choices and kind of crises that people face. So I can definitely see these kind of, not that one was inspired by the other, but you can kind of see these filmmakers who are of the same ilk kind of picking up on the zeitgeist of like getting into these beautiful little character studies, putting them
right.
out and having people discover them. Much better than, a lot of this blockbuster slop that you see nowadays in the cineplexes.
I think, yeah, it makes. I would love to know. Man, I wish I would have known that. I would. If I was talking to, we got to kind of hang out with Angus and Jane Levy afterwards in the lounge, and if I would have known that, if I'd have noticed that Kogonada was listed there, I'd be like, "So, I noticed. What's your connection there?" Just because Kogonada in Columbus, I could see how they would be, as Tammy said to Bill, kindred spirits. Both of these movies could be kindred spirits in that they're kind of have a contemplative pace about them. That's somewhat unexpected. Mainly, I only say unexpected just because it's asking maybe a viewer to, like I've mentioned before, the word calibrate themselves to this pacing. Not that it's not as neither of these movies are slow, but it's just asking us to look at these characters in a way that maybe we're not used to. Yeah.
And also, I think to use a word that you had mentioned earlier, notice things. Um, it doesn't open with the kitchen breakfast scene of like, oh, Tammy's out in the little house in back. We see Tammy waking up next to David and then getting up and leaving and going into the main house and making breakfast. Like, what's that all about? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of trust in the on the part of MacLachlan to have us figure these things out. And yeah, okay, maybe this is worth watching 3 times. Okay, David, we're gonna.
One more thing, I will say that it's worth mentioning that we did mention briefly his other adult child, Patty, played by Anna Camp from Pitch Perfect fame. I thought that it was interesting to have another sibling there, or another child there, David's sibling, um, and you could see that she's a handful, kind of a whirlwind, and you could see how Bill, he's looking at her as well. She can be. You could see how she could be a lot, and he wants to support, like, obviously both children, but there's a grandchild involved, because Patty's daughter is probably about 7 or 8 years old, and she's definitely a willful, stubborn child who doesn't really listen to anybody. And, like, I put myself in Bill's position. I'm like, oh, okay, so now I have another generation to look at, and where I probably screwed up at some point. It's like you think, because she doesn't listen to really anybody.
And you kind of understand why, because Patty is all over the place. She kind of sees her daughter as a nuisance. There's that scene where Hadley, the little girl, is standing
Tricycles.
on the seat of the tricycle, and Bill's like, get down from there, please. And then Patty swoops in out of nowhere and takes Hadley off the tricycle seat and says, "What are you doing, stupid?"
Yeah.
And it's just like that. Oh, you just feel so bad for her.
And Hadley just stubbornly says to her grandfather, no,
Yeah.
just like kids do. And
And you realize, yeah, she's growing up essentially in a big city meth den, or wherever.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were from Kentucky or somewhere else, but where they were staying with Cassius, the dad that we never saw. That was another surprise. I expected there to be some kind of a confrontation with the dad and that whole thing, but we never see that. That's resolved, sort of, or maybe not even resolved. The one final thing I'll say, I don't know if this was an accident, or meant to be humorous, or meant to be a meta commentary. But as Patty is pulling away in the minivan with Hadley in the back seat, and Bill has just slid her a check. She's going back to her druggy husband and all this other stuff. I think Vanita says, "Be careful on the road now," and Patty acknowledges that, and she drives away without wearing a seatbelt.
Not wearing a seatbelt. That's right. And she said something like, or I think Vinny says something like, stay awake, be careful. And she's like, "I'm going to Starbucks."
Yeah.
I'll be all right. I'll stay awake and go to Starbucks.
This is an hour and 26-minute PSA about being an attentive, loving, involved parent, if nothing else.
It really is. But like I said, Tammy and Bill, Jane Levy and David Strathairn's characters are really the heart of the movie, and I think these are the two characters you kind of really feel for and see the connection. And I think it's just for that alone, seeing a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law, with such a tight connection is rare. And I think it probably happens more than you think. So I think that's, kudos to the director and the writer for including that. It's just kind of a rare thing.
Yeah, I do like that. As you're saying, well, I mean, we have a whole lot of these kind of like indie family dramas,
Sure.
but very rarely does you come at it from that perspective. And it's not necessarily that it's so much different in the performances or the writing of what happens between these characters. It's more like that, the old joke of like, "Oh, I hate my in-laws," or "My in-laws hate me," or whatever. You come into that with that baggage, and you think, "Oh, this is a unique take on a kind of relationship that we only usually hear about in jokes or in kind of tropey pop culture references." So yeah, it's very special. All right, David, I'm going to let you get out of here. It is Saturday morning, after all. We were up way too early talking about this movie, but I'm glad we did. And and folks out there, if you like this conversation, please go check out A Little Prayer, courtesy of Music Box Films. It's likely playing in an art house near you. Hopefully it's not struggling for competition against Avengers 26. But and if you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that business. And David, thank you for hanging out and talking about this movie.
Thank you for having me, as always.
All right. Well, until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.